Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar on the collection and recording of suspected adverse events. My name is Irene Zanetti. I am the change manager at EMA's Veterinary Medicines Division. And as we're all aware of, the Veterinary Medicinal Products Regulation calls for the establishment of a Union Pharmacovigilance database as of the 28th of January 2022. The system will process and manage veterinary pharmacovigilance messages. This webinar is the first of a series of training events on the new EVVET 3 system, and it will focus on the new requirements for the collection and recording of suspected adverse events for veterinary medicinal products. And it will also provide a demonstration of the basic functionalities of the system for recording, searching, and downloading suspected adverse event reports. At the end of the webinar, there will be a 30-minute session for your questions. We kindly ask you to please type your questions into the chat. And should we not be able to reply to all questions today, we will include the answers in the post-event documentation. All questions and answers will be put together in a document and published on EMA website, together with today's presentations. In order to ensure a clear presentation and avoid any background noise, could you kindly make sure that your microphone is muted while you're not speaking? And please also be reminded that today's webinar is recorded for training purposes, and it will be published on EMA website in the coming weeks. By continuing to be in the session, you are consenting to be recorded. Your personal data will be processed by EMA in accordance with Regulation 2018-1725, and should you not agree, we unfortunately have to ask you to leave this meeting. After this short introduction, and without further ado, I will give the floor to Jos Olaerts, the head of EMA's Veterinary Risk and Surveillance Service. Jos, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Irene, for this introduction, and welcome to all the participants. And I'm going to start thanking also my two main contributors, which is Laura Descalzo and Gilgueria Spirou today, who have worked flat out lately on not only this training session, which is the first one, as indicated by Irene, of a number of training sessions that we are planning and that we are preparing for. And to just give you a little bit more background, many of you also have been actually involved in the setup and the creation of the guidelines that will support the legislation. And these guidelines, I'm happy to say, they have been signed off and adopted by the committee CVMP last week and also the CMDV. So they're now just going under a final editorial review and sign off, and they will be published very shortly. So we're in the situation today that we are actually having a training before we even publish the guideline. I think many of it is you're already familiar with. We also know that recording and collecting of adverse events remains the cornerstone of pharmacovigilance. So they create the data for us to work with. So that is still as before. Many of the principles that apply still under the current legislation continue to apply. We know we have an improved system coming up, and we hope we can show you that in the presentations today. But of course, you will wait, and you're waiting first of all to see the guideline, and then secondly, you want to try out yourself. So soon, and I can't give you the date yet, but you will have available a test system to work on. And in addition, we will have proper manuals ready also to help you introducing the data, so following actually and working with the test system and doing the interpretation and working with the guideline. So I have to also to thank other colleagues that have been working with us in the preparation and that will support us today, which is Sabine Tannert from the BVL, Sonja Schwab, Richter Pharma, Ron Diep, Bowie from Boehringer Ingelheim, and Andreas Werner. I think, Andreas, you are representing Access VetMed, I think, today. So you will hear from all of us today during that session, and we will help answering the questions that you will come up with. So this is an invitation to use the chat, and we will be recording continuously your your questions and trying to think already about the answers, preparing the answers for when we have the Q&A session later on. One other point important to say is that, overall pharmacovigilance is changing from no more PSURs to single management. And single management means that it is even more important when we try to analyze the data at database level, that the data are of good quality. So that's my main message. Please put a lot of effort whenever you get adverse events. Try to get all the information that will help us all, yourselves and the regulators, to try to see if there's a potential relationship between that event, which are always spontaneous data, and observational data. So by definition, it's not an easy task. So you need to have as many as possible information available for a report before you can reach a conclusion. So that's my main message today, and I'm looking forward to working with you all. And of course, this session is our first. We will have many questions. As Irina said, that probably we're not entirely sure yet ourselves. We will have to discuss a little bit, but we will try to give the answers then later on in proper documents, other Q&A documents that we can release as a follow-up, and through follow-up training sessions as well. So that is my introduction. There are 2 sessions with a coffee break, as you can see on the agenda. And please, please, Glikeria, go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. I would like to welcome you all to this training today. The aim of this training is to highlight the new elements related to the collection and recording of adverse events in view of the new EU Regulation 2019-6. If we can please go to the next slide. Apart from this training today, there will be step-by-step tutorials that will be focused on the use of the new system, EVV, and they will become available shortly. We will present in brief the regulatory framework, and then we will also focus on the topics that are either new or considered important, therefore they will be highlighted. We will have a short break, and then a live session will follow regarding the new system, EVV. It will be not a field-by-field demonstration. It will present the basic functionalities of the system. And once the demo session is complete, we will move on to the Q&A session. As mentioned before, an additional training is scheduled for January 2022, and this will be focused on the system functionalities in more detail and on any clarifications that will arise from the training today. Next slide, please. And the next one, please. Regarding the regulatory framework, the basis of the regulatory framework is the new regulation, the new EU regulation 2019-6, which will become effective as from the 28th of January 2022. The relevant Commission implementing regulation 2021-1218 was published in August 2021, and the basis for the new EVV system, as well as for the new regulation, has been the VICH guidelines on pharmacovigilance that you can see in the slide. Next slide, please. Regarding the requirements for the reporting of suspected adverse events that are mandated by the new veterinary regulation, more specifically in Article 73.2, the the requirements more or less remain similar to the ones that are mandated by the current legislation, and you can see them on the slide. However, we have highlighted in bold the new elements that are mandated by the new regulation. And the new elements are the lack of efficacy, not in accordance with the summary of product characteristics, the environmental incidents, which have required a definition to be established, which will be presented in the next slides, and also any unfavorable or unintended reactions in an animal following the use of a medicinal product for human use. Just to present the main differences from the current legislation regarding the collection and recording of suspected adverse events, according to the new legislation, all suspected adverse event reports should be recorded directly in EVV within 30 calendar days, irrespective of their seriousness. Therefore, all cases, serious and non-serious, will be reported directly in EVV in 30 calendar days. As mentioned before, there is also the requirement for the collection and recording of any observation of lack of efficacy in the new regulation, also not in accordance with a summary of product characteristics. Regarding the environmental incidents, this has been well structured under a new definition, under the new regulation, which will follow in the next slides. And this has been the first time that we have introduced a definition for these cases. In addition to that, we have the new requirement for the collection and recording of adverse events to animals following the use of a medicinal product for human use. And another new element is that with the new regulation, no causality assessment will be required at individual case report level. Additional information on that will follow. The last new element is regarding the adverse events that are originating from clinical studies for authorized veterinary medicinal products and post-marketing surveillance studies for veterinary medicinal products, and these reports should be recorded in EVV within 30 days from the date of the closure of the final study report. This is the new element regarding the timelines for reporting. In the next slides, we will focus on specific topics to highlight, and we will present examples regarding the recording in EVV, and I will give the floor to my colleague Laura Descampo.
Thank you, Glyceria. So we'll begin with the seriousness classification. My colleague Glyceria has mentioned before that the new guideline does not make a distinction between serious and non-serious adverse events. All those reports will have to be sent to the system. However, the VICH guideline mandates the inclusion of this information on the adverse event report, and it's a mandatory field. So therefore, it's got to be included when you send an adverse event report. And because the new regulation does not have a definition of seriousness, the decision that has been made is to recommend that you follow the VICH definition of a serious adverse event when you complete this information in the system. And we have included the definition in the slide for your information. The next aspect that we will be focusing on in the next few slides will be lack of expected effectiveness. So in the new system, it will be possible to record information for cases that have both safety and lack of expected efficacy aspects. So there is a specific field in type of information on report where you will be able to select this information. And in those types of cases, all the federal terms have to be selected in EVV, including lack of expected efficacy. And if we move on to the next slide, please, we will present an example on how to record this information. So you've got, let's say, a group of animals, and some of them have adverse events and some have lack of expected efficacy. So we've got 30 pigs which have been vaccinated with a product X. 20 of those show clinical signs such as diarrhea or vomiting, and also 3 of those also present signs of lack of expected efficacy. How would you record that information in EVV? So on the type of information on the report, you would select both safety and lack of expected effectiveness. And then when you record the VEDRA terms, you can select the VEDRA terms that show the clinical signs, so you would record diarrhea. And this is a new aspect as well of the system. We will be showing you more examples later. You can associate the number of animals that had that specific VEDRA term. So you can put 20 pigs had diarrhea, and the 20 pigs also showed vomiting, and then 3 of the pigs had lack of expected efficacy. And if we go to the next slide, please. This is not new, the considerations we are going to mention now, but I think it is important to go through them today. So when you are reporting a case of lack of expected effectiveness, the signs of the disease should not be coded as VEDRA terms. And we're going to go through some examples. So there is a vaccine for L4, and the usual adverse events that you may see with this vaccine could be an increase of body temperature, swelling, which is transient, or anaphylaxis. On the other hand, for the leptospirosis disease, most usual signs could be bleeding, hepatitis, jaundice, or nephritis. If the signs of the disease were coded when reporting an adverse event, and the system will create what we called a drug event pair between the vaccine and the signs of the disease. So you can see them listed there. And if we go to the next slide, the effect that can cause then in the system is twofold. So in one hand, the VEDRA terms for the disease sign may appear as new signals in the system, even though they are not adverse events, they are sign of the disease. On the other hand, they may also mask potential signals for other products. So as in the example we are showing there, so you've got another product X, for which we've had reports of hepatitis in the system. However, if many reports had been sent to the system for the vaccine we mentioned before, including the signs of the disease, when the ROR for the is calculated, the information for vaccine L4 with the VEDRA terms for the disease are included in the denominator of the ROR calculation, which is the measure that we use to highlight potential signals in the system. Hence, because the ROR, the denominator becomes higher, it is more difficult to for the ROR for the product X to show a potential signal. And if we move to the next slide, please. So to finish with this topic, we will present 3 possible cases and how to record them in EVV. So case 1, you've got product X for which hepatitis is not a sign of the disease. Let's say it's a product for osteoporosis, to treat osteoporosis in dogs. So the product has been used in an animal and is caused an adverse effect of hepatitis. So to send this report to EVV, on the type of information on the report, you would select safety issue and you will code the hepatitis as a federal term on the report. Then we move on to case 2, which is the vaccine we were talking about for L4. So it was administered to a herd of cows, and a couple of them show signs of lack of expected efficacy. And they may experience then the disease. However, when you send the report to EVV, you should not code the signs of the disease, such as hepatitis. You will select lack of expected effectiveness, because in this case, there is no other signs on the animal. The only sign is lack of expected effectiveness. So you select lack of expected effectiveness on the type of information of the report, and the only federal term that you select is lack of expected efficacy. And then we move to the last scenario. Then you've got product Y, another product. Then in this instance, when the product was administered to an animal, you had both some signs of lack of efficacy, but also you had some clinical signs, which in this case is hepatitis. So in that instance, you would select both safety and lack of expected effectiveness in type of information, and you would code lack of expected efficacy and hepatitis on the VEDRA signs. Please let's go to the next slide. And I will pass back to Glyceria to continue.
Thank you, Laura. Regarding the requirement of the new regulation for the collection and recording of environmental incidents following the administration of a veterinary medicinal product, there is a new definition established that will be available in the annex glossary to the VGVP modules. As you can see on the slide, the new definition is as follows. An environmental incident is a situation where an ecosystem is adversely affected through exposure to a veterinary medicinal product, its active substances or its metabolites present in different environmental compartments or animal remains. Such incidents may consist, for example, of the presence of the active substances in soil or water, or wildlife poisoning by a substance to levels considered harmful for the ecosystem affected. It is to be highlighted that the events related to user safety are not considered environmental incidents. With regards to how these incidents should be recorded in EVV, the type of information in the suspected adverse event report should be other, and the relevant VEDRA term, in this case environmental adverse event, should be selected. Any additional specific information regarding the environmental incidents should be recorded in the case narrative. Next slide, please. We wanted to provide you with an example related to an environmental incident, and to provide you with some guidance on the recording of the affected and treated animals in EVV. In this example, a sheep owner dipped his sheep in a dip, and this dip was a fish pond which was not leak proof. So the product administered leaked into a river nearby by mistake, and there was a number of fish died. In this case, the number of affected animals should be the number of fish, and this is the mandatory field in EVV, and the species should be fish, the affected species in this case. And the number of treated animals should be the number of sheep, which is not a mandatory field. Laura will continue with another case for the adverse reactions in humans exposed to veterinary medicinal products.
So let's go to the next slide, please. So this is also a new aspect brought in by the VICH guideline. So in EVV2, there were two separate forms to report animal adverse reactions and human adverse reactions. In the new system, there will be only one reporting form, and human should be selected as a species. And only one human should be included on each adverse event report. If there are more than one human affected, then you should record another adverse event and then link them using the link report field. With regards to VEDRA terms, another new aspect in the system is that now it is possible to link the number of animals to the actual VEDRA term. So as well as including the number of animals affected at report level, you can also associate the reports to each specific VEDRA term. We have included some examples on the slide. So let's say you had 10 animals that were treated and 5 of them showed adverse events. So 5 of the animals had vomiting, 2 of the animals showed dyspnea, and then 1 of the animals died. So it is possible to record that information against each of the VEDRA terms. And even if you don't have precise information, there is another field that allows you to record that the information that you have included in the number of animals is actually an estimation.
We're going to present now some guidance regarding the cases where parents and offspring may experience one or more adverse events following the administration of a veterinary medicinal product, for example, during pregnancy or during lactation. In these cases, the number of animals treated should always be the parent, and in the number of animals affected, the relevant mandatory field should be recorded against the relevant VEDRA term as per the general rule for all adverse event reports. We have included 2 screenshots from the system for your reference. Regarding these cases, an important element would be to highlight that the treatment start date should be the date the parent was treated, and the clinical signs in the case narrative should include the clinical signs of the offspring as well of the parent. The number of animals affected should include both the number of parent and the number of offspring. And we would like to highlight 2 specific cases. One case is abortion. In this case, the number of the parent should be recorded as the number of animals affected against the VEDRA term abortion, and the number of animals aborted should be stated only in the case narrative, and they should not be counted as number of dead animals. And in case of stillbirth, the number of dead offspring should be recorded as the number of animals died, and the VEDRA term stillbirth should be used. Next slide, please. We have an example regarding these cases. So a farm has been vaccinated and with vaccine X, and 12 animals of the 120 have aborted. Approximately 22 offspring have been aborted. About 60 lambs were born too weak and died. 5 or 6 lambs had deformation on legs and neck. In this case, the veterinary abortion should be linked to 12, which is the number of parents, and the death would be the number 60, related to the lambs born dead, born weak and then died. And also the number 6, which in this case is estimated, will reflect the veterinary term malformation for the lambs that have presented deformations. Additionally, the number of aborted offspring, in this case 22, could be stated in the case narrative. And as you can see in the case, we have identified the numbers for abortion and death as, the numbers for abortion as the actual number, and for death and malformation as estimated numbers. In this slide, we would like to highlight the new aspect of the new regulation that is related to the fact that the causality assessment at individual report level is not required. Experience has shown that the causal association at individual report level is often inaccurate, and it can be prone to bias and variable over time. Therefore, with the institution of the signal management process, it is no longer necessary for the marketing authorization holders and the national competent authorities to indicate their interpretation of the causal association for each of the veterinary medicinal products at individual report level. It is, however, recommended to record in the case narrative the opinion of the primary reporter, identifying which medicinal product or active substance are considered suspected whenever this is available, and in particular if this is a veterinarian's assessment. Therefore, all the medicinal products or active substances included in an adverse event report recorded in EVV will be considered suspected for the process of signal management. And the available fields, as mandated by the VICH guideline GL42, can be left blank. We have included in this slide a screenshot from the system to present to you the fields where the marketing authorization holder's assessment and the regulatory authority assessment can be captured, but as we mentioned before, this is not required. We have also added a note that for adverse event reports, for example, regarding third country reports, including marketing authorization holders or regulatory authorities assessments, these will continue to be accepted. Next slide, please. This is for Laura.
So in the next few slides, we're going to show various situations on how to record the medicinal products information in EVV when you are sending an adverse event report. So first, the main principle is when you are recording the product name, if you know the full name of the product that was administered to the animal, it is advisable to select it because then this will mean that the information that you are selecting in the adverse event report will be automatically linked with the union product database. And this will have various effects. So in the first instance, it will allow the marketing authorization holder to obtain level 2 access to the case. And later on in the presentation, we will go into what this means. And also it will allow then to group all the data for this product for signal detection in the future. So the entries in the product dictionary are shown with the symbol that looks like a floppy disk. You can see some of the representations there on the slides. So if we move on to the next slide, please, then it may happen that you only have partial information. So you may know the invented name of the product, but you don't know exactly which strength, or you may know that it was the, let's say in this case, the chewable tablets. So the system will allow you to select as much information as you have. So there are several potential combinations of the invented name with the strength or with the pharmaceutical form that will allow you to record as much information as you have. And then if we go to the next slide, please. There can be also situations that when you search for the information in the product dictionary, you don't find the brand name of the product. And also there is another situation when a human product may have been administered to the animal and human products are not available in the dictionary. So the system allows you to type the information in the field, and then the information add X product as a new product appears. So you need to click that information and then the product will be entered in the adverse event report. Then if we move to the next slide, please. There may also be instances where only the active ingredient is known, and the system allows you to enter that information. So when you first open the adverse event reporting form, the registered name or brand name field, as it is known in EVV, appears red, which means that is mandatory. However, if you enter the active ingredient information on the relevant field, then the registered brand name field becomes then blacked out. So that means that it's not mandatory anymore. And on the next two slides, we will focus on how to record dosage information in EVV. So on the first glance, when you look at how to record the information, it may seem quite complicated. We are only going to present a couple of examples on the slides, and there are several other examples on the VICH GL42 information. So what VICH agreed when they were defining the guideline is to follow internationally agreed standards to record this information, so in a similar manner to what is done in the human side. So you have to enter values for the numerator and the denominator. And I think this is best illustrated with an example. So we've got some text at the top. Let's say that an owner gives 3 tablets to the dog. How will you record that? So on the numerator, on the numeric value part, you would enter the number 3. Then on the numerator, you can also select either units of measure or units of presentation. In this case, because tablets are included in the units of presentation, you will include tablet you will select the word tablet from the list units of presentation. And then we will move on to the denominator, because these tablets were administered to one animal. That is what we will record in the system. So on the denominator part, on the numeric value, you will enter 1, and then there is value for the units in the denominator called dose denominator qualifier, and in there you can select animal. And then if we go to the next slide, please, we've got a different example there. So in this one, there is a herd of animals, and the veterinarian administers 10 milliliter per kilogram of body weight. So in this instance, then, on the numeric value of the numerator, you would enter the information, the 10 milliliters, then for the units of measure. And then on the denominator, you will record the body weight information. So in there, you will select 1 for the numeric value, and then on the units of measurement, then you will select kilogram. And please, let's go to the next slide.
Yes, for the next 2 slides, Sonia Schwab has kindly volunteered to be the presenter. Thank you, Sonia.
You're welcome. Just a few words on the recording of off-label use. In fact, it hasn't changed that much, so we'll go through it rather quickly. For each product reported in your case, there will be the selection of off-label use, and it can be, of course, either yes, no, or unknown, as you can see at the top right of the slide. As soon as you select no as option, you will have several other options to choose one. Again, just with a slightly different wording, but in principle still the same choices as in the current system. And I think for the majority of the cases, the definition of off-label, or the determination if the product was used off-label, is rather straightforward, like in the examples on this slide. For example, a sheep was treated with ketoprophene, but the product is actually only authorized for the target species, cattle, horse, and pig. Then, of course, the use in this case was off-label. Again, if a cat was treated with buprenorphine and was given this subcutaneously, the product is authorized for intravenous or intramuscular use. Again, very simple. The route of administration is off-label. It becomes a little bit more difficult if your product is a product that's pretty much always used in combination with other substances. A typical example for this would be anesthetics. There is a wide range of substances that can be combined. Dose is dependent on several factors, like what are the other combination partners, what is the condition of the animal treated, and also what kind of procedure do you want to perform. Is it very painful or not? Therefore, this will very often result in off-label use. For example, if SPC recommends a combination of, this example, ketamine with meditomidine, xylazine, diazepam, as soon as you add another combination partner, the use is, of course, off-label. Again, as I said, those recommendations can vary widely, and the SPCs of 2 combination partners may provide different recommendations on those for the same combination. And therefore, very easily, one of the products will be off-label. Again, here in the example, as you can see, in one product, the combination is 40 microgram of meditomidine per kilogram plus 5 to 7.5 milligram per kilogram ketamine. And the other product says something differently. If your product is the ketamine product, and the veterinarian used the dose recommendation provided in the meditomidine product, of course, the use of ketamine was off-label. And another effect that's also pretty much always off-label is that anesthetics, especially those given for induction of anesthesia, are usually given to effect. And again, no such dose recommendation can be found in most products. This will, again, very often result in off-label use, overdose, or underdose. Yeah, thanks. Next slide, please. That was it from my side.
Thank you very much, Sonia. So then I will continue, and on the next topic, on the next two slides, we are going to talk about the adverse event report identification number. This is the equivalent to the worldwide case number in EVVED2. And the VICH guideline states that this number should have the following format. So the first 3 digits should be the country of occurrence. The next 8 digits for regulatory authorities should be the regulatory authority identifier code that you will find on the VICH GL30 guideline. So in there is a list called VICH RA identifier code, which shows all the codes to be used for each regulatory authority. And on the slide, we are showing an example of how one of those worldwide case numbers may look like when the report is sent by the Danish competent authority. So the first 3 digits represent the country of occurrence. Then on the next 8 digits are the RA identifier code for the Danish agency that is included on this RA identifier code list. And then the next part is free text. So that is what is called the internal case reference code. And for regulatory authorities, that is just free text. You can give your own case number in there. It is very important to note that on the VICH guideline, there is no other place where you can state the country of occurrence. That is only included on this 3 digits part of the AR ID. And then we will move on to the next slide, please, and we will present how marketing authorization holders will construct this number. So it is again in 3 parts. The country of occurrence is the same rule as for the NCAs, so it's the 3 digits country code. Then for the next part is where it gets slightly more complicated. So unlike for regulatory authorities, there isn't a list for marketing authorization holders organization IDs. So for organizations that are currently registered in EVVED, they've got what is called a routing ID, which is used as the sender or receiver information in the report. It is most likely that for many of the marketing authorization holders, this routing ID or sender ID will not be 8 digits. Hence, you will not be able to use it as your marketing authorization holder ID for this 8 digits part of the worldwide case number. So then what you would need to do is generate a unique 8 digits ID using an algorithm, which is called a CRC32 hash generator. There are various tools available online to generate this ID. And what you need to do is take your current sender ID or routing ID, as we call it interchangeably, and enter that information on this CRC32 hash generator. And that will generate an 8 digits ID that you can use as your MAH org ID. And this ID will be used in all your adverse event reports. So you only have to generate it once, and then it will be used for all your reports. And then for the third part of the worldwide case number, where you will enter your case ID, then in there it is advisable that you also include your routing ID as part of the remaining text, because that will help us to ensure that it helps with duplicate to keep this worldwide, this AER ID unique. If you include your routing ID as part of the free text, will help to keep this ID unique, because this is, if in the chance that two separate organizations send the same AER ID, assign the same AER ID to a case, this will generate a duplicate. So the advice is to include your routing ID on the free text part of the number to stop or to help with the unlikely case that a duplicate is generated. And if we go to the next slide, please. So for initial reports and follow-ups, so it is very, very crucial that the AER ID from the initial report is not changed when recording follow-ups. If you use CiviWeb to record your cases, what happens is that this information is locked, so you will not be able to change it. But of course, for gateway organizations, it is important that you do not change the AER ID when sending a follow-up. Then the original receive date, which is the date of receipt of the initial information from the primary source that is recorded in the initial AER, should not be changed when sending a follow-up. And also on the VICH guideline, when you are sending a follow-up, there is a type of report that you can use to select that you are sending a follow-up. So there is an entry, which is follow-up, that you can use when sending a follow-up report to EVV. So for the initial report, you would use on type of report the value expedited, and for follow-up reports, you will use a follow-up in type of reports. With regards to the date of current submission, which is the equivalent to the most recent info date in EVV2, we had some guidance for this field. However, we've had some internal discussions with regards to the guidance that we had proposed, and we may slightly amend it. So it's under discussion, and we will follow. We will provide this guidance shortly. And if we move to the next slide, please. Then we're going to talk about duplicate management on this slide. When we go live with the new system, the automated duplicate management system will not yet be available. It is one of the first things that will be developed after the minimum viable product, but it will not be yet available when we go live. So we've included some guidance on what to do if a suspected duplicate is detected. So we've included the information on the slide, but I will go quickly through it. So if you find two reports that you think they may be potential duplicates, the AER should be compared. So if they are similar and they are not duplicate, then nothing needs to be done. If they are found to be duplicates, then the organization which finds this report should contact any other organization involved in the report, and the parties should agree amongst themselves which AER should be retained and which one should be nullified. And the adverse event report that is the one that's selected to be retained, should be updated with any information that was included in the other report. And it is very important also that the AER ID for the report that is retained should be communicated to all parties involved, because that is the ID that should be used in subsequent follow-ups. And the sender organization nullifies the AER deemed as duplicate, so the one that is going to be discarded. However, if there are various versions of the report that is going to be discarded, so there was an initial report and then another organization sent a follow-up to that report, it's the sender of the latest follow-up who should send the nullification report. And please, let's go to the next slide. Now we are going to discuss the EVV access policy and how that affects the access to the information for marketing authorization holders. We are going to focus on marketing authorization holders because for regulatory authorities, nothing has changed. So they retain access to all the adverse event reports in the system. With regards to marketing authorization holders, there are 3 levels of information. So if the MAH is the sender of the report, then this hasn't changed. The MAH has access to all the fields in the report in the system. Then what is new is this, what we called the level 2 access. So marketing authorization holders would have access to all the reports for their products sent by other organizations, and they will have what is called level 2 access, which includes the case narrative. And then for all other adverse event reports, which the organization, the MAH, has not sent to the system or do not contain products owned by the marketing authorization holder, then they will have level 1 access, which is the same as it is now on the public reports that are available on the EMA website, so no access to the case narrative. And if you wish to have further information on the access policy, there is a link included here in the presentation, and you can access it via the EMA website as well. And next slide, please. And continuing with access, this slide looks a bit busy, and we are going to go through a couple of scenarios. For example, if you have an organization that is composed of a headquarter and various affiliates. So who would have access to what information? And we've included a table there showing various scenarios, but I'm going to discuss a couple of them. So at the top, you've got there the organizational hierarchy. So you've got the headquarter and various affiliates, affiliate 1, affiliate 2, from which are in different countries. Then we've got another diagram representing another marketing authorization holder. And then we've got a set of products there, product A, product B, and product C. So product A is a product for which the headquarter is the marketing authorization holder. Then product B is the affiliate 1 is the marketing authorization holder. And then we've got product C for which affiliate 3 is a marketing authorization holder. And then we've got in the scenarios as well 2 NCAs. So let's focus first on scenario 1 on the table shown there. So the headquarter sends a report to EVV, and in the report, it mentions product A. So product A, as we mentioned before, is owned by the headquarter. So the users, when they try to retrieve data from the system, if you have a user from a headquarter organization, they will have level 3 access to this report because they were the sender organization. However, affiliate 1 and affiliate 2 will have level 1 access because they do not own any of the products from this report, and also they did not send the report to the system. NCS will have level 3 access, and then any other marketing authorization holder, which is the external organization, so the last column, will also have level 1 access if they don't have any products mentioned in the report. And then we can then move on to scenario 3. So in this instance, the affiliate 1 sends the report to the system, and they are the marketing authorization holder for the product mentioned in the report. So the headquarter, as we mentioned on the note before, the headquarter will always have the highest access level for the affiliates. So the headquarter will have level 3 access to the report. Affiliate 1 will have level 3 access because they sent the report, but affiliate 2 will have level 1 access because they don't have any products mentioned in the report. And then we can move on to the next slide, please, which is the end of the presentation. With regards to the questions, like Irene said before, we will answer all the questions at the end of the demo later on. Thank you very much for your attention.
So thank you very much, Laura, for this very good presentation. And we were very busy. We were kept busy in the chat. And thank you all for contributing and raising the questions. So we have noted them all. We are in the background. We are with the panelists already dividing and thinking about the answers. So we've all noted them down. We're grouping them a little bit, and we'll come back to them later on at the Q&A session. So I believe now we have a break of 15 minutes. And I think in terms of the timing, it looks good. So let's follow the timing of the agenda on the screen, 3:25, and then we will start with the demo session. Thank you. So I hope you had a good break, all back from the break. And now for the moment suprême, we will have the system being showed by Laura. Go ahead.
Thank you, Josh, for the introduction. Now you've made me laugh. Okay. Katerina, if you allow me to share my screen, please. Now I'm going to do a demo of the EVV system adverse event reporting tool. A couple of caveats. I'm going to use the test system, what we call the user acceptance test system, to do the demo. And we are currently heavily testing the system. It's not the production system, it is the test system. So we may not all the functionality is there. Most of the functionality is, but not all. So we want to be able to demo a couple of functionalities, and also some things may go wrong during the demo, so please bear with us. So what I'm going to do first is show you how to log in the system. With regards to if you are currently a registered user in EVVED, you will be able to keep your username, but you will need a new password to access the system. So I'm going to use an MAH test account to access the system. So then you will need to enter your password. And then the same as now, the first thing you need to do is select the organization from the list, because some users may be, let's say, QPPVs for various organizations. So you need to select the organization for which you want to send an adverse event report, and then click select. And as I mentioned before, it is taking a long time to log in. So if it takes a couple more minutes, what I will do is I will refresh and try to log in again. If this fails, I will go in incognito mode and try again. Oh, there it is. So this is when you log in the system, you can see at the top here information about who is logged in and the organization they represent. Then on the left-hand side of the screen, you have 3 sections in here. So one of them is AER, the other one is mailbox, and the other one is organization list. We are going to start with the AER section. In there is the part of the system that will allow you to create and send adverse event reports, and then it will also allow you to search for reports and send for the batches that you may have sent to the system. So we are going to start by taking a look at the create and send section. So once you click on the section, you get a menu here on the left-hand side that will allow you to either create a new report or import a file that you may have saved previously in the system. So we are going to show you first how to create a new report. And as you can see, the interface is much more modern than the current EV web. We hope it's a big improvement. And the way the interface works, you've got sections on the report. The data is divided in sections. So the first part is when you enter the information about the batch that you are going to send to the system. And I will go into more detail later. Then you've got the information on each adverse event report that you may include in the batch. And then the data is divided into 2 main sections. So on the first part that is there with marked with an A, we've included the section numbers from the VICH guideline to help, for example, with troubleshooting. And the first part, A, is related to mostly administrative information. So who is the sender of the report. So in this case, because I'm logged in as a marketing authorization holder, it will show there the information for the marketing authorization holder, the organization logged in. If I was a representative of an NCA, the section that will be shown here will be a section called regulatory authority. So it takes the information from the logged in user. Then in section B, is where you will find the areas where you can include the information on the animal data, the product or products used, administered in the animal, and then where you can record the adverse event data, such as enter the case narrative or any VEDRA terms that you may wish to code. And then at the end of the information, you can link any reports that warrant being evaluated together or reported together. And this is a new aspect as well. You can add documents to the adverse event report. So if you've got any, for example, there are various types of documents. So if you've got any articles that you may wish to send, or if you've got some results from tests, you can attach the file to the report and then label it accordingly and send it as part of the adverse event report. So I'm going to go a bit first through the structure of the adverse event reports, because in the previous DEG guideline on which EVVET2 was based, there were two levels on the report. So you had what is called the message level and then the report level. And in one message, you could send one or more reports. On the VICH guideline, there are actually three levels. So you've got the batch level. So when you report, you need to give what is called a batch number. Unlike for what we spoke about earlier, the worldwide case number, the adverse event report identification number, there is no convention for the VICH batch number, but it's got to be unique for the organization. So every time you send a batch to the system, you need to use a new batch number. And then on the next part, and well, we can go through it. As you can see, the system is used the information from the login user to complete some of the information. So the batch sender identifier has been populated with the name of the organization that is logged into the system. And because all the reports are meant to be sent to EVVET, to the central database, the information on the receiver identifier has been repopulated with EVVET prod. And the date of the creation of the batch has been populated with the current date. And then we are going to move to the second level, which is the message level. But what we have done to facilitate things and to avoid confusion, the two next levels, so the message level and then the report level, have been flattened into one level. So you can only send one adverse event report per message. And then in a batch, you can send several messages. So at the end of the day, it has the same effect as we had before. So you can include several messages within a batch, and in each message, you only have one adverse event report. It sounds complicated, but it is more or less how it used to work before. The only additional thing that you need to do now is you need to enter, as we mentioned before, a batch number, and then you also need to enter a message number, which also needs to be unique for the organization. So it's an additional step to which you had before in EVVET2. And in here, as I mentioned before, we may find some bugs because the message receiver identifier should also be repopulated with EVVET2. Then we will move on to the rest of the information. So what is interesting here as well, if we go to the section persons involved in the adverse event report, the sections marked in red, by the way, are mandatory or contain at least one mandatory field. And as soon as you complete all the mandatory information, then this red label here will become black to show that all the mandatory information has been completed. This symbol here as well means that one or more of the mandatory fields in that section have not been completed. With regards to the information on the primary report, due to privacy laws, the only information that should be recorded in the section is on the last name, because it's a mandatory field. You should enter the initials of the primary reporter. So let's say, LD. And also, you should send to aid with duplicate detection, you should send the first 2 digits of the postal code of the primary source. And the recommendation is to include that information as well in the last name. So if the postal code was 9728, you would include 97 in here. So then you have the initials of the primary reporter and the first 2 digits of the postal code of the primary source. And then you also need to enter the country of the primary source and the category, which is if it was a veterinarian, you can select so. And then there is a list where you can select the country of the primary source. Also, in general, the sections that have a plus next to them are repeatable. So if you click on the plus, it will allow you to include another report in the batch that you are sending. So you can send more than one report within the batch. And if you want to delete it, there is this symbol here that looks like a pen. If you press it, it removes it from view. So with regards to the information on the adverse event, in here in this field is where you would enter the unique adverse event identification number. So you need to enter then the first 3 digits of which represent the country code of the country of occurrence, then the 8 digits for the marketing authorization holder ID. So, and then we said that you should also include the routing ID for marketing authorization holders. So let's say if for OmniFarm, the routing ID that is currently registered in Pharmacovigilance is OmniFarm. You include it there and then enter the rest of the information. You've got up to, I believe, 47 characters to enter the rest of your case number. In here is where you can select the type of submission. So you can select whether the case is expedited. One thing that we have done is we have removed the follow-up type of submission from the new adverse event report, because to send follow-ups, what you will have to do is search for the initial report in the search AER section. I will show you how to search for reports later on, and retrieve the report from there, and then you can send a follow-up. The reason for that is to avoid sending duplicate cases by mistake, because if when you are trying to send a follow-up, you make a mistake on the unique adverse event report identification number, then you will be creating a duplicate instead of a follow-up. So on the next section, we can now move on to the animal data section. So as before, you can record the number of animals treated and number of animals affected. And to select the species, you just click in here and then you can type, for example, dog, and select it from the report. And in VICH, when you record a breed, you can state whether it is a purebred, the animal is purebred or crossbred. So you can select if the animal was purebred, you can select it in this part of the form. If the animal was crossbred, you can select 2 or more breeds on the crossbreed part of the form. You can also state the weight and the age of the animal and say whether it's measured or estimated. With regards to human reports, as we mentioned before, human is now considered as a species. So to send a human report, you will simply select the human entry on the report here, and then the number of animals that also refer to humans. You will enter 1 in number of animals, 1 or more, maybe, treated, but 1 animal affected, 1 human affected. It will always be related to 1 human. If there are more than 1 human involved, what you should do is create various reports, and then there is a field here on B6 that allow you to enter the unique adverse event identification number of the report, of the other report you want to link to the one that you are sending, and then you can select an explanation for the linkage. Then we can move on to how to enter information for the product or products on the report. So because you can have more than 1 product involved, the section is repeatable. And to enter another product, you will click on the plus, and it will allow you, it will generate another section for the second medicinal product. So then you will be able to enter the information for the other product. And I will show you, you cannot hear me?
Some people say it's going down sometimes.
Okay. I will try to speak a bit louder. So during my presentation earlier, I mentioned that there are various ways of recording the product information. So I'm going to show you first how would you search for a product. So you click on the field, and as soon as you start typing, the system starts looking on the product dictionary and starts producing suggestions that match the text that you are typing. So if you knew that the animal had been administered the exact product here, you will select this entry. As I mentioned earlier, it is best to select the most precise information. And then the system populates the registration identifier of the product and the ATC vet code. So we've got a bug there, like, because instead of showing the code, it's showing the text, but it's still the correct one. And then what happens if you don't know the exact strength or pharmaceutical form? So we can type a product again. So as you can see, below the full name of the product, you've got various other entries that break down the names, the full brand name, into different parts to allow you to record as much information as you have. So if you knew that the product was administered, the animal was administered this product, but you don't know which strength of pharmaceutical form, you can select this entry and to record the most accurate information. And then, as I mentioned before, if it is a human product which is not in the dictionary, or simply you cannot find the product that you wish to report on the entries that are presented to you, then you can type the information in there, and the system tells you that no suggestions have been found. So then to commit the entry, you click on this, and then the entry will be recorded. Now we can move on then to the use according to label. So you've got a section here where you can state whether the product was used according to label or not. If it wasn't, you can click in no, and there are various entries that allow you to choose the most relevant off-label use. Then we can go to the adverse event data section. So in there you have the section where you can enter the case narrative, and then the section that allows you to record various the adverse events as federal terms. So you can just type the narrative in there. And then let's say that the animal, to use one of the examples we had before, presented vomiting, diarrhea, and then let's say we had 5 animals treated, 3 were affected, 2 of them had diarrhea. I think I've got cap lock, but it doesn't matter, it's still set. And you can say 3 of those animals had diarrhea. And if you know that this was the exact figure, you can record actual. And if it was an estimate, then you will select estimated. And then 2 of the animals had vomiting, so you can record that as well. And then let's say 2 died, so you can record death. And in here, as we mentioned earlier, the field seriousness is mandatory, so you have to state whether it's serious or not. And in here, you can record the outcome. So if, let's say, 2 of the animals died, we can record the number of animals there. So these are some of the new aspects of reporting adverse event reports. So once you had completed all the mandatory fields in the system, we haven't for this demo, then you can validate the report. And what happens is, if you have completed all the mandatory fields, you will not have any errors here. If you had forgotten to complete one or more of the fields, you can click on the error and it will take you to the section that you have not completed yet, so you can complete the mandatory field that you may have forgotten. And once you have validated the report, then you can click on validate and send, and it will be sent to the system. So now we are going to move on to how to search for reports for the product. Or we've got various criteria that you may wish to use when searching for reports. You can search on the unique adverse event identification number if you are trying to search for a particular report, We, at the moment, have a bug in there, but I'm going to show you that there is another way of searching. So you can either, when it's working, clicking here, enter the report number, click update, and then search. But as that option is not currently working, you can also have another option where you can click there. Have I copied it properly? And the system will retrieve the report. Now I'm using the wrong one, that is why it's not finding. So this is the report number that I wanted to use. We will perform the search again with the correct number this time. And you can see that the system has found the report number that we were searching for. Here is the unique adverse event number. So you can, as I mentioned before, there are many criteria that you can use when you search for reports. For example, you may wish to search for reports that were sent to the system between 2 dates, and we are going to remove that criteria, the exact date, and we are going to enter a range of dates. So you can either type the date or select it from the calendar. So let's say I want to see all the reports that were sent to EVV between 1st of November and the 9th of November. So in this case, we only have that number. I'm going to remove the criteria we have on top, just in case they are conflicting, and I'm going to run the query again. Yes. So in here, we've got a set of reports that were sent to EVV between the dates that we selected. You can select on occur country as well. And if you're a marketing authorization holder and you want to select the reports for your products that have been sent to the system between this date and this date, you can then click in here and find the criteria. I'm going to make more room so it makes it easier. Marketing authorization holder. So in here, you would select the name of your organization, click update, and then the system will retrieve all the reports for the marketing authorization holders selected, sent to the system between this date and this date. And as well as that, you can select data for, so you can either search based on the marketing authorization holder, or you can search for a specific product. And on the criteria, you've got various options. Matches will be based on the text that you enter here, so it will select the entries that match the text that you put here, or you can search based on contain, and the criteria will be that the system will find all the reports for products containing the text that you selected here. I am not searching at the moment. We will do that in the next webinar because, as I said, not all the functionality is currently working, but I'm just giving you a demo of the potential that the system has. In the next webinar, we will have finished our testing, and then we will show you all these features working with specific examples. Then, once you have retrieved the information that you were searching for, you've got various options. So, for example, if you're a marketing authorization holder that has their own system and you wish to import this data into your own system, what you can do, there is this box here that is called Export XML. You can tick it, and this will generate an export file that then you can download and import into your own system. There is a lot of reports there, so it is taking some time. As I mentioned, this is the test system. But this is how you will do, this is the interim bulk section. So as you can see, the system has compiled all the reports selected, and you can then import this information into your own system. Then you may also wish to send a follow-up for one of or more of the reports. You can do various things. So you can first view the report. This eye allows you to view the information on the report. So if you click it, you can see the information there on the report. And if you click on the report number there, some of the functionality here becomes available, so you can send a follow-up for it. You can see here the message report added to follow-ups. So then if you go to the create and send area, you will see that the report has been added to the section here. And as I mentioned before, you see that the unique adverse event identification number is blocked. So you are not able to alter it in follow-ups. And the type of submission is now follow-up. You can also download the report either as HTML or XML. So we can have a look at the HTML view. So it presents you with the information on the report, which you can then save. How are we doing for time? Okay. So as well as searching for reports, you can also search for batches. So it works in a very similar manner. So you will select the criteria that you want. Let's say I want to search for a batch that was sent to the system between the 1st of November and the 9th of November. So here the system tells you how many reports each batch contains. In this instance, all of them that we are looking at there contain one report. but I was trying to find an example of a batch that contained more than one report to demo it. Perhaps we can sort it. So next to the fields shown here, there is an arrow that allows you to sort the information based on either on the highest or lower number of reports. But in this case, this is not, there's still only one report per batch. What else can I show you? I think I've more or less shown all the functionality that we can demo at the moment. Just from your view of the questions that you have there, are there any that can be answered now with the aid of the system?
Okay, I'm going to the document now where we have the questions, and then I'll try to pick up the ones that are related to the system immediately, Laura. So
Okay, yes. Meanwhile, while you're searching through the questions, yes, I didn't mention the mailbox much because most of the reports now, if not all, should be sent to EVVet. So what you will find on the mailbox will be on the inbox, you will find acknowledgement messages for the messages that you have sent to the system. And then on the outbox, you will find the messages that you have sent to the system. So I'm logged in as this organization. I'm not sure whether any messages have been sent to the system from this organization ID. Let's try to find the information. So let's say the sender is, oh, I'm using fields instead of, let's use send date from and send date to. So on the outbox, I want to see all the messages that my organization sent. Let's go back a little bit just in case. From the 17th of October to yesterday's date. Let's see if you are lucky. So I will talk while this is looking for the data. So what the system will retrieve here is all the cases, all the reports, batches sent by this organization between date 1 and date 2. So that is the output that you are supposed to get from the results of this query. I'm going to stop it and go back into it. And on the inbox, then what you should find is the acknowledgement messages for the messages that you sent to the system. I'm not going to put any criteria to see if any information has been sent with this user. what I can do. Meanwhile, if you wish, while I try to find this, we can move on to the other questions.
Yes, thank you, Laura. So what I will do is we prepare the document internally where we have listed the questions, and some of the answers are already provided by the panelists. So I will go through it and read it out, and then, if necessary, still invite some of our colleagues to give maybe further feedback or input from yourself, Laura. So the first question from El Castelbrink was about how to get actually access to the Pharmacovigilance database, how to get new access. So this we will do in the Q&A. We will come back to that, and we will provide you the details on how to ask for access, similarly like it's currently you also have to do on getting access to Eurovigilance Veterinary 2. So how to change a password, similarly, there will be specific guidance on changing password and also how getting access. We had similar question from Paolo Bergamo, again on how to obtain a new password. That will be, we will have specific guidance on that, so I don't think you need to go into that now. We don't need to show this. Then the question on compatibility with the different browsers. So the answer is the question is with which browser will it be most compatible, or any other browsers? Is it going to be Chrome? Officially, we will support Chrome. We will make our best effort to make it work also in other modern browsers like Edge and Firefox. So that's the response internally. Thank you. In terms of the question, where are the actual technical requirements described? Are the list of the compatible web browsers. I think we can make that available in the technical documentation that will be that would also be made available. Laura?
I think the information is already in the implementation guideline, and if it's not, we are going to release a new version shortly, so we can include that information there.
Okay, thank you. A very obvious question, but maybe why not address it? Difference between a VICH batch number and a medicine batch number. And they're not related. The VICH batch is a way of grouping adverse event report messages in one file, so they're totally unrelated. It's a bit an unfortunate use maybe in the context of medicines to use batch, but that's also the term that is used when you combine different it's like adding different letters in the same envelope and sending it as a VICH, as a batch. Laura?
And just to add, in the VICH guideline, what you know as the batch number is actually known as the lot number. I think I'm showing the field there on the screen.
Okay, thank you. One question that we have already received in other forums, I think, relates to if we include lab reports and they might contain personal data, what would be the recommendation on submitting these lab reports as attachments, Laura?
Any personal data should not be transmitted in the report, so they should be anonymized.
They should be blanked out, basically, on the PDF or picture that you will be taken. Can the message number and batch number be the same? And the answer is only if the batch only contain one message, and therefore we do not recommend this. So the recommendation is not to do that. It's theoretically possible, but it's not recommended. In terms of the creation of the batch and the message number, we refer to the VICH guidelines. There are no specific requirements other than the maximum length of the batch and the message number. Just
And the uniqueness, they've got to
And
be
the
unique for
uniqueness.
the organization.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. And so we had another question, similar question on VICH batch number, same as message number. No, again, we do not recommend this. Question is, why do we need actually the postcode in the last name section when it's only going, when there's already one in the address section?
Because we will
Go ahead.
use it for duplicate management, and it's a lot easier to find the information for the last name and the postcode, because we will use the initials of the primary source plus the information on the postcode. So if that information is concatenated in one field, it's a lot easier for the duplicate management to use than if you have to find it in two fields.
And the other reason is historically, I think also, so even before the GDPR was there, we had a recommendation that instead of the last name, it was recommended not to include the last name, but at least then for the duplicate detection, use part of the address. So it historically also one of the reasons was to include that postcode into the name. Colleagues, do I at the same time, or we go later then maybe to other additional questions by raising hands, or yeah, now, or should I think I better wait till I go through all the different questions. Thanks. What is meant by expedited in you know, currently it's indeed an interesting question, and it was from several people. So when would you actually use the periodic report? Because in the context of our new legislation, everything is being reported within 30 days. So what is left to be periodic? It's a good question.
We've included it simply because it's one of the values mandated by the VICH
Exactly.
guideline. In GL30 is one of the values for that field, so it has been included.
So the question is, the answer is that, you know, in all of this, we have been working with the VICH requirements that are existing already a few years. And those requirements are in place for example, by the FDA. They are operating in line with it. So we have to make sure that our system complies with those messages. So anywhere when, in this case, periodic is available, we have at least provide the option. Although it's correct in the context of our current legislation, it's no longer used. That makes me also, some of the questions that we have received are very specific in terms of the case. You know, sometimes the case is described with different types of offspring situations. And I have to admit, we had several meetings on this, trying to see how can we provide proper guidance for all these situations. But we have to realize that I think we're lucky in one sense that this cannot all be automated. We are working with live animals. We have a number of different situations. And that's also what we know from signal detection. And we will show that when we come to the training later this month. Signal detection, in essence, has not really changed so much to your assessment of the data, because at the end of the day, you will go into the relevant narratives and you will start reading the case report, and from that you will take you make your clinical assessment. That's also the reason why often it is really necessary to have a veterinary looking and helping you with analyzing these data. So by saying this, it's obviously that we cannot accommodate a system that is there for every eventuality and every situation. So you have to use your common sense sometimes to put the data in. And whenever you don't find an easy way forward to use a standard the standard fields available in VICH, it's the general recommendation is please include the whole story of that event in the narrative, because the narrative is the defining part of the report that will, at the end, will be read and will determine whether there is potential causal relationship or not by reading the all cases and similar cases, but that's for another training session. But just to say that it's logic that this system is not available to capture and to cater for all eventualities. So I'll continue with the questions. So the one question is how to save the data in between. So is it possible today to have an automatic saving? Unfortunately, it's not automatically saved. So the data are available while the session is active. If you need to stop, you can export the data and re-import later on. So at this moment, it's better to work quickly.
But as you mentioned, Josh, you can export the message and then re-import it and continue working. So it is actually the same as the current system.
Okay.
One of the first features that are going to be developed when after we go live is a draft functionality. So you will be able to save the incomplete batch as a draft and then continue your work. So we have thought of that feature, and it will be developed shortly. But obviously we had to choose because we had a limited time frame to deliver the system, what to deliver.
Okay, thank you. There's one question here that I'm going to read out, Laura, and because I'm not entirely sure if I understand the question. According to past discussions with EMA and NCAs, we have established extrapolation rules internally in order to select a precise presentation based on animal size or our sales volumes. So I'm not sure if this is related to the presentation or the choice of the product, or if it's actually on the dose. And so the question is, what is the recommendation now? Do we keep the extrapolation rules for selecting the product strength or select an imprecise data? So I think in the current system, what I understand, you can include, it's more a text field maybe in the current system, while we're moving for the strength to, you need to make a precise selection. Is that correct?
The system allows you to do both. So I think the recommendation should be to include as much information as you know. If you don't know the precise product, you should not include an extrapolation because that is not really correct. The system allows you to select the other values that to reflect the actual information that you have, because your extrapolation may not be correct. And in the future, if there is an issue with a precise formulation, then because you've extrapolated, the case will be added to that batch of data, to that set of data, which is not correct.
Okay. Thank you very much. As a question here on the time to onset is no longer captured for the different symptoms. So I'm not sure, Sabine, if you would be, I think you were working on, perhaps, did I see an answer coming through? It's not on my screen here. Sabine?
Can I ask a question? A time to onset is currently also not precisely documented. It is not allowed to document it for the symptoms and either not for products. So no missing functionality.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Sabine. Go ahead, Laura.
I think I am displaying the information on how to record. So what you can, the information that you can send on the report is the date of onset, and you can also choose the length of time between the exposure and the onset of the reaction, and then the duration. So with all that information, you can probably calculate it.
Thank you. Next question is an important question from Stephanie Fleischacker. How can an MAH be sure to identify all cases for an own product, which were actually sent to EVV by another MAH when the other MAH has registered the product under a name with a spelling mistake? So it's like a concomitant product was used in a report and it was actually reported on with a spelling mistake. So that is very often the case, and that's not the mistake or on purpose, of course, by the MEH. So that's why we are having the what we call the recoding or the coding. So the first ambition is now that we have the Union product database to have all the product data in there. They need to be submitted by the member states. Once we have the product data in there, we're talking about the non-CAPS data, because the CAPS data, we have them already in there. The non-CAPS data will then be coded to the adverse event. And we have people doing this that will do the actually coding, and that will include also coding whenever there's a spelling mistake. So one person will go into the UPD and into the Eurovigilance database, will identify all reports for a certain product name, and they will see that the name was actually misspelled several times. It's their task to identify the correct product and then to link the correct product to the correct product name to that adverse event report. Once that linkage is done, you as a company will have access to that product. So there are a number of steps. First of all, we need to get the data in, product data. Then they need to be recoded, and then you will have access. There is a way to already find it, and we will show that in the upcoming trainings for signal management. There are queries in Eurovigilance that allow you to query all the cases for a reported brand name. So you can start typing in your name, and you can see actually all the corresponding reports that have come in, even the misspellings. At that moment, you can actually see, and you can do a query on the basis of these reports, but you can only see the summary information of the reports. You cannot drill down to the narratives yet. We will do that for the next training set. But so the information, of course, is not lost, but you will have to wait for the recoding to be in place and the product data to get access. We will definitely come back to that on the next training. Laura?
Yes, I was going to add that because, as I mentioned before, the demo, not all the features are working correctly at the moment. We are testing them. So on the next webinar, we will be demonstrating how to do that. Okay. Both in this and the reporting tool will be showing you how to search and by product, and also when we do the data warehouse one, the signal management.
Okay, thank you. There is a question, and I'm not sure because I wasn't following at that moment where you actually have shown it and that was at the time you were showing export functionality. You were showing the export of the batch, but is there a possibility to export as a PDF? The case, I guess so. Can you?
We've got the HTML functionality, which then I guess you can save as a PDF once you've exported it.
So when you go in, I guess when you go in your inbox and your outbox, you have there's possibilities to select the case and then trying to do that now, and maybe we can show it.
I've just selected one precise date. So
yes.
Maybe you can start reading other questions while I search, try to find some information to demo it.
After sending a batch, is the system going to send an acknowledgement? The answer is yes.
We have a caveat for that. At the moment, you cannot do manual acknowledgements in EVWeb. So if you send the report to the database, to EVVet, then you will get an automatic acknowledgement. The system allows you to send the report to other receivers, but if the other receiver is a web trader, they will not have the capability of generating manual acknowledgements yet. That
Okay.
it still needs to be
Will
developed.
be developed. Yeah. Thank you. Is there a field to show whether it's a safety report from a spontaneous or a non-spontaneous source, Laura? There. Yeah. You're muted, Laura. Just.
So we've got expedited, periodic, nullification, obviously follow-up, and other. So I guess out of all those choices, it will fall into the other.
Well, but it's not possible to actually make the distinction between spontaneous and a non-spontaneous source. But it's a relevant question because, Ligeria, do you know when there are recommendations, there were other questions actually related to what about reports from clinical trials? So can we indicate in the report itself that it's actually coming from controlled clinical trial?
Only in the case narrative.
Only in the case narrative. Okay. Not ideal, but again, VICH. Can we search by active substance?
Yes.
Yes.
You will be able to search as active substance, and we will demo that next time.
But the follow-up question is by somebody else, but it's relevant. Is this interface also to be used for signal detection? And the answer there is no. This is so the signal detection we will do in the next training. You will see we have a dedicated data warehouse queries for that, which are much more powerful and give you other type of information and summarizing this. So the search function here is more searching your inbox, outbox, finding data, right, Laura? Yeah.
Just looking at how to save the report as a PDF.
Mm-hmm.
So what you can do is, sorry, I've got things on top of the functionality. If you go to you search for the reports, then you click on the download functionality and select HTML, and you open the report. Then in Chrome, for example, you can go to print, for example, and then you can select Adobe PDF there if you have it installed. I'm not sure whether Pedro Panayota will have any other suggestions, but that is one way of doing it.
Thank you. So the important question, I think, for industry is another question from Laura Gardi is if we search cases using the field MAH, are we sure that we will recover reports sent by other MAHs as their case may have not documented who is the MAH of our product? So again, maybe once more clarify, and if we cannot entirely now, maybe we can come back to that in the Q&A, but what will be the way if the information is recorded for the companies to obtain their reports related to their products?
So the answer is on the process that you mentioned earlier. So depending on the quality of the data on the report,
I think the question is, so let's assume that the product is there, and let's assume the recording is done. What would be the query for the company to go into the system and make sure that they obtain that type of information?
So you search on the value product MAH. There is
Okay.
a criteria which is MAH.
Okay.
In there, you would enter the name of you will search for the name of your organization.
Yeah.
And then you can retrieve all the data for products belonging to that organization. But obviously, to know that the product belongs to a specific organization, it has to be recoded. So it's a process that Josh mentioned before. Yeah. If the information in the report contain the full brand name that, as stated in the UPD, then the linkage is done automatically and you can obtain your data directly. So as soon as the report gets to the system, that is one aspect that we need to mention. It is very, very important that you are consistent when you enter the product information, because that will help you then retrieve the cases afterwards. So if the information is very precise as per the naming in the UPD, then you will be able to obtain the reports straight away. If the name does not match an entry, then we need to link it manually by the process that Josh mentioned. We've got a tool that allows you to search for names of products that have not been linked to the dictionary. So then we manually link them, and then you will be able to get the access. Because once we link it to the UPD, then in the UPD there is information of who is the marketing authorization authorization holder of the product. So that is what allows you to retrieve the information.
Okay, thank you. Katarina?
We have a raised hand by Enrique. Enrique, if you want to ask your questions, I can unmute you.
Thank you. Important question is about RTF. Will we have the possibility to save RTF files? Because XML file is not readable, easy readable. So it is important to have RTF. If the program doesn't have, I think Emma should think about this. You can see many people asking about RTF files. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Enrique. I'm not sure. Laura?
Maybe Pedro can contribute as well. At the moment, the two options that we have is either HTML or XML. If you have a look at the HTML format here, we've tried to make it as readable as possible. This obviously contains test data, so it doesn't make much sense. But I think it is quite clear, the information that you can view on the HTML format. I'm trying to find, yes, for example, on the primary report category, you can see there the information. You can see all the different sections of the report, and you can see the data there quite clearly stated. Do you think this will be good enough, or do you think the HTML, the RTF version is still required?
There is feedback from people that say it's readable, but it's not easy to save. So I think there seems to be a request maybe as to consider the RTF. So I think thank you that's noted for that proposal. And then Pedro is online. I'm sure he was listening with us. There are further questions. I'm just gonna, because there are many questions. How long are adverse events retained in Eurovision's veterinary database? The answer is forever, but we will try to specify a little bit further. So agency is following, commission guidelines on how long we have to maintain the data and our dossiers and everything. So for a very long time. When will the test be available for the MEHs, also the system? And so this is still to be defined. We don't have an exact date yet, so soon hopefully, but testing is ongoing. Correct. Is there a standardization of WH naming of MAH naming, e.g., due to alignment with UPD? Also, when a brand without strength is chosen from drip down, as UPD may not contain such an entry. Otherwise, MAH may miss cases. Is there a standardization of MAH naming due to alignment with UPD? I think it's very similar to the same questions that we've answered in terms of coding and recoding. Laura?
I will try to respond to that, and maybe Pedro can clarify if I'm not very clear. So if you choose a partial entry, that entry will be linked to all the products in the UPD that match that string. I'm going to use the example I was using when I was doing the data entry. Let's say somebody reports Draxin. So what the system will do is link that entry to all the products that have Draxin in the name in the UPD. So that is how it will work.
Okay.
So then you will not miss the reports for your products because it will be linked to all the potential presentations in the UPD that contain that string.
Thank you. Next question is, day 0 is not included to be completed. Day 0. It's not ground 0, it's day 0. Yes, maybe what is meant here, I see the question came from Carmen. Maybe if you...
Carmen, if you could raise your hand so I can unmute you, I would be very grateful.
Okay, we will follow up with Carmen. Okay, yeah, let's go to the raised hands, although I will actually, but we'll take one by one a little bit, but I've got so many questions where people have already tried to answer, so we'll give that priority, but now go to...
Now we have a raised hand from Boda. I'm gonna unmute you. You're now unmuted.
I have just one question. I would like to know how to manage the submission of former cases with the old format of the worldwide number when we want to submit them after the 28th of January.
Thank you very much. Yes, we have not forgotten about that question. That was part of the list. And Pedro, you were raising your hand maybe on another topic, but this was already for you. Pedro is not connected.
Yeah, do you want me to come in, Jos, on this one?
Yes, please, Pedro.
Good afternoon, everyone. So yeah, in that case, you will need to use the new format, the new format number. So all the cases that you submit before the 28th of January, if you need to do a follow-up, you just use the same AER ID that you used before, or the worldwide case number, if you want to call it like that. But anything that you send after the 28th of January, then you'll need to update to the new format of the AER number. We discussed yesterday with some stakeholders. We believe this will be a small number of cases. We can discuss if you think that we'll have a big transmission or a large quantity of cases in this situation.
Just to come back briefly on that question, we know that one of the transition proposals that we have made is that if you are in a situation where you have like a PSUR normally coming up in February, then the proposal was that you would be submitting actually the non-serious cases since the last PSUR DLP date up to the 28th of January next year to make sure that the regulators have in the system all the non-serious cases for the assessment of the first assessment of single management, including for yourself. So that could be a situation where you as a company still are working on, let's say, a batch of non-serious cases, and the recommendation is there that please try to submit these cases if you're in that process of preparing those cases. Submit them before the due date. Sorry, before the 28th of January next year, because then you can still use your current DEG number. But after that, you would then have to change them all if you would try to do that. Thank you. There's a question about what are the criteria for including several AERs in the same VICH batch. There are non-criteria, but the sender and the receiver of the batch must be the same as the sender and the receiver of all the messages, which is obvious, I think, but that's just to be clear. But there are no real rules for you to, so you can combine reports on different products, or as long as the sender and receiver are the same for all the messages. Are the cases sent by other MEHs sent automatically to gateway users, or should they be searched from EVV? Yes, so that's a main change in the current system. So all cases go directly to the central database, like on the human side, and it's up to the MEHs for downloading the cases from EV Web. We are debating for an interim phase, but maybe an undefined interim phase, but we are debating with the regulators, competent authorities, whether we would advise authorities to still communicate reports that they send to EV also to companies. I mean, this is not a commitment now, but it's just to say that's under debate. And the reason why this is under debate is that as long as the product information would not be available, that might be easier, and that might facilitate the access to that data directly for you companies. The MEH will receive a message from another organization, sends an AER from one of its VMPs. Teresa Villa. The MEHs will need to download the cases from EV Web. It's the same answer. Go ahead, Laura.
I was going to say they will not receive a notification. They will have to actively search on a regular basis.
Got a long question from Tony Simon. Regarding searching for XML reports which may contain our own products, e.g. submitted by other MEHs, will we be able to build and maintain a query to identify such reports based on all our global brand names / active ingredients / names of marketing authorization holders? Else it is not clear how this will work under practical conditions for larger multinational MEHs. So that's, yeah, it's...
Probably Pedro will be best placed to answer that. The solution that we are proposing here for searching and downloading is what we call an interim solution for the time being. So after we go live, we are going to develop a more sophisticated solution for basically tailored for MEHs that have a large number of reports.
Pedro, anything to add maybe on this? I can understand it's an important topic for the industry. Is Pedro not connected? No longer connected? Tony, you want to come in again on this one, please? Go ahead.
Just give me a minute to unmute you, Tony. You're now unmuted.
Yeah, thank you and good afternoon, and thank you very much for this, I think, very helpful training course. It's clear that there's a lot of change and a lot of new information for many people. In relation to the particular question I've got is, and thank you, Laura, I always get nervous about interim solutions because those tend to mean more manual workarounds. And for marketing authorization holders, what I'm really concerned about is 28th of January, it goes live, we go into it, and we suddenly realize that we need 3 extra people to be able to manage this. Is there any understanding as to any estimate as to how this might look for larger marketing authorization holders, or how we can prepare for it, or whether there would be some acceptance of, I don't want to use transition measures because I know the EMA's position, the European Commission's position on transmission measures, but pragmatic workarounds until we're in a position to more readily reach a more satisfactory situation of full compliance. Thank you.
Yeah, Laura's looking at me. No, but I can try to answer. I'm sure this is not a topic that will disappear from our agenda, and we're looking at pragmatic solutions which were not called transition periods, but kind of joint responsibilities, maybe with the expert group that we are discussing on setting up at EU level at regulatory. So we understand that we need to find solutions, which is also, this question is linked to the situations where you basically have no access because the product data are not there yet. So I think it's a little bit linked, and we're trying to look for compromise solutions. So I keep on saying we're kind of in the same boat on this, and we recognize the issues that you may have. So to be continued, and of course the dates are coming soon, but we will maintain that topic also on the agenda of our stakeholder meetings.
And just to reiterate that we've given it the top priority for development after go live.
Thank you. Thank you, Laura. So there is, sorry, there are a number of questions which we all have already addressed a little bit. Another raised hand from?
Another raised hand from Barbara. I'm going to unmute you now, so please go ahead. Barbara, you are unmuted. Can you hear us?
We don't hear you yet.
There seems to be an issue. Yes, please. Or not. There's an issue with your microphone.
Can you hear me?
Now we can hear you.
Hear me now?
It's intermediate, kind of. Just try one more time, please.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. So my question is regarding the reference numbers. Is there any way that we can link a reference number from a veterinary product to a human use product? For example, now that humans can have are regarding as the affected ones, could it be linked to the human database? And wouldn't, for example, the clinical part, like adverse events in animals, shouldn't it be connected to the human part for context and non-clinical evidence?
Laura?
I think there may be two aspects to that question. So in the form, you can report adverse events in humans that have been either accidentally exposed or taken a veterinary medicinal product. So that is one situation. So in that case, you do not need to report human products unless there are any other concomitant medication. At the moment, which were human products. At the moment, we haven't got a link with the human product database, but that is something that, if it's required, may be considered in the future. But if you needed to assess information for a human medicinal product during, there is a way, I think Josh mentioned it briefly earlier, there is a way on the data analysis system to search for products on the basis of the brand name, for example. So you would be able to group all the information for, let's say, a human product, searching for the brand name, and then retrieve all the information. Does that answer the question? Or
Yes, not
fully?
entirely. I know. So again, it's something that we have discussed also before, and I think it's one of the improvements, but we have the thumbs up for the moment as an answer. So we are very close to the end of our session. I'm going to take one last question here from Roger Pavazovic. It's in section where we assign symptoms to number of animals experiencing it. In a case where one animal have, e.g. recumbency and later died, we need to add one animal under recumbency and death, or we add two symptoms under that one animal. And how does total number of animals reaching calculates it? So one other specific case, but it's one that maybe often, it's not a, go ahead, Laura.
So I can show you how to do that. So if we said that the total number of animals affected were 1, on the field number of animals affected here in human data, you record 1, and that will be the data. This will be the field that will get, it will be used for the total number of animals affected. But then on the adverse event data section, you can enter each relevant federal term. I'm not going to search, but for example, let's say this was recumbency, then you will put one animal, the animal that had recumbency, and then you can add another federal term.
Like that.
And death, and you will select. So when you are calculating the total number of animals, you will not be adding this together. Okay. The calculation will be taken from here. This is more useful when there are many animals involved, but only some of them experienced the adverse event. So let's say 5 experienced this one and 2 experienced this one. So it's to be able to assess the data for each federal term.
I think it's very clear. Thank you very much. So, colleagues, we are coming to the end. We have a large number of questions still, but they're not lost. Just to say that we will make an effort to either some of them we can include in Q&A, some of them we will address specifically at the next training that will help us to focus on what are the specific issues. So there, we will definitely be working on it. We know also that during this session, I think we continuously had about 450, 500 people, but some still had issues. But this is being recorded, and this will be available soon to be reviewed, those that were in a position that had missed part of it. So it can be, where is it going to be? On the webpage event. Thank you very much. And then what other thing did I have to say, Laura?
That with regards to the system, in the next webinar in January, the system will be fully tested and stable, so we will be able to demo all the functionalities we couldn't show today.
Yeah. Okay, I think I'm going to close the webinar. Thank you again, colleagues, for preparing it, for presenting it, and thank you for all your input. We have a lot to learn from it still. We're developing every day, and we will be happy to come back to you later on with follow-up trainings. Thank you very much and have a nice evening.